What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I'm your host, and my name is John. And this week we are back to analyze and predict the UFC on ESPN Plus 11 card headlined by Alexander Gustafsson versus Anthony Smith, going down this Saturday, June 1st. At 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a European card, so the prelims will get started in the morning or at 10 a.m. with the main card starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At the end of the program, we will be quickly recapping the UFC Rochester card that went down 2 weekends ago. We had last weekend off, there was no UFC, but this week we are back in Stockholm, Sweden, and it was supposed to be a 13-fight card, but we just received news that Volkan Ozdemir versus Ilir Latifi, the co-main event, has been canceled due to an injury from Ilir Latifi. Real shame about that one. That was going to be a really good fight, and I was actually in the middle of doing my tape study on that fight as I found out the news. So, that's a pretty big hit to the card, but there are still a lot of solid matchups. The European cards always have, a lot of unique fighters that, tend not to fight too often. So it's a pleasure getting to see some of these guys fight. And we got 12 good matchups going down this weekend in Stockholm, Sweden. So we're going to start things off in the lightweight division. We have Danilo Belluardo, who is 12-3, taking on Joel Alvarez, who is 15-2. Now, looking over at the opening betting line for this fight, we had Alvarez, the favorite, at -135 to Belluardo at -105. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook 5Dimes, line margins have tightened up, and we are seeing Alvarez -115 to Belluardo at -105. So the fight opened at a near pick'em, and it's still at a near pick'em. There's money coming in on both sides of this fight, but it's honestly a very hard fight to predict, in my opinion. We have seen Alvarez fight in the UFC once already in a loss in his last fight to Teymur Ismagulov, and we have not seen Belluardo fight. He is making his UFC debut in this fight, and there's just a lot unknown about both of these fighters, specifically the debutant Belluardo. Making his UFC debut in this one. He's coming off of a victory against an opponent named Neves de Oliveira. It was a nice victory. He showed some good takedowns in that fight. Not very solid defensively with his takedowns. He was taken down a few times himself. He, left his neck out going for takedowns and was in a couple tight guillotines, but he was able to get back to his feet when he was taken down, and he was able to escape the guillotines when he was attacked with them. So he stayed safe in that fight and eventually just outgrinded his opponent in the last 60 to 90 seconds of that fight, got some top control and won a very close fight. But he has also been knocked out a few times. He's been actually 3 times he has been TKO'd in his career, all going back in 2016. So once against Luka Jelicic, he was rocked with an overhand right and TKO'd. And he was also taken down, mounted, and TKO'd with ground and pound versus Stefano Paterno back in 2016. So he is definitely beatable. He's lost before. His chin might be a little questionable. He was rocked with some sloppy punches in his career. So, his stand-up, he looks pretty uncomfortable in that aspect, and he's definitely looking to get this fight on the floor. But that plays right into Joel Alvarez's game, because Alvarez is a submission specialist. He, I think 14 of his 15 wins have come by way of submission. And, again, he does not look too comfortable on the feet. He, has, some decent leg kicks. He, has been knocked out with kicks himself before. And, that fight against Ismagulov, he just didn't look very good in that fight. He did not look very aggressive. He was not throwing with much power. He was just, looked like he was content to lose in that one, content not to get knocked out. He was just, outstruck that entire fight, really struggled with the boxing of Ismagulov and, lost that fight decisively. So it was a pretty lackluster debut from Alvarez. It was, a very, very disappointing performance from him. He showed nothing good. He didn't show any takedowns off his back, but I expect Belluardo to get the takedown. But I think that Alvarez will get back to his feet. He will make Belluardo work. He will tire Belluardo out, going for those takedowns. And I expect in the later rounds Alvarez to take over and eventually get his own takedown and his own submission. So I'm going to go with a round 3 submission for Joel Alvarez in this one. But in the betting window, it's definitely going to be a pass on both money lines. I could not trust either of these guys as a favorite. So, just stick with props in this one. But I imagine the Alvarez submission prop is not going to be good value either, because that is how he wins most of his fights. But those lines are out, so we might as well check it just for the sake of it. Alvarez by submission plus 200. Yeah, so not very good odds in my opinion. That's going to be a pass on all aspects of the betting for me. So next fight is in the light heavyweight division. We got Devin Clark, who is 9-3, taking on Darko Stosic, who is 13-1. The opening betting line for this one was Stosic, the minus 265 favorite, to Devin Clark at plus 185. Since then, the line has flipped. We are now seeing Dev Clark minus 120 to Stosic at plus 100. Very shocking line movement in this one. A huge amount of money coming in on Dev Clark, pushing him from plus 185 underdog all the way down to a minus 120 favorite. Just an insane amount of money coming in on Dev Clark, and honestly, I disagree with it. I don't really understand where it's coming from. Stosic is not very proven. I think he's only had 1 or 2 fights in the UFC so far, and I think it's 1 fight, and it was against Jeremy Kimball. And, he was waiting in that fight, and then when Kimball swarmed him with some sloppy attack, Stosic, avoided the takedown, got on top himself, and just smashed Kimball with some ground and pound. So it was a very effortless victory for him. He looked like he was, bored in there. He knew that Kimball was, going to make a mistake shortly into the fight, so why even take a risk? He barely threw any punches himself. He was just waiting for Kimball to make the mistake. He did make the mistake, and then he capitalized and got the ground and pound finish. So not the most, exciting performance. He didn't really show too much of his game, but, he got the win, and he did it, very convincingly. So Dev Clark, in his last fight, he was actually supposed to fight Shaitkov back in Russia, but I think his fight got canceled the day of. His last fight was a knockout loss to Alexander Rakic. He had a little bit of early success in that fight with some elbows while Rakic was going for a takedown, but eventually Rakic recovered and then was able to drop Dev Clark with a back fist and then finish him up with some punches with some ground and pound for the finish. So what worries me in this fight is Dev Clark's chin, man. He has been, knocked out a few times before. He has shown a suspect chin. He has fought his fair share of heavy hitters, and he's dealt with some of them well. The most notable being Mike Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a very talented striker, and Dev Clark dealt with him very well. Dev Clark has a wrestling background. He was able to use his takedowns, his clinch game, and grind out that fight against the fence and on the ground and neutralize a powerful striker like Mike Rodriguez. So he definitely is going to try to implement that same game plan in this fight. He's going to try to take Stosic down. He's going to try to push him against the cage. He's going to try to, blast that double leg takedown and get that top position to win this fight on the scorecards. But I don't think it happens, man. I think that Stosic is, he's a very short, muscular guy. He's got a very low center of gravity. I think that Dev Clark's going to have a lot of trouble getting Stosic to the ground. And, he's just so strong that, he'll get that wizard on you, he'll get that underhook, and he'll just use that strength to avoid the takedown. And that's exactly how I see this matchup going, is Clark shooting for the takedowns, Stosic stuffing them, and eventually touching the chin of Dev Clark with a powerful strike on the feet. Clark was dropped with that weak back fist from Alexander Rakic not too long ago, so the chin is definitely in question of Clark, and I think that Stosic will eventually touch the chin of Clark with a big powerful punch and eventually get the TKO victory in this one. I'm gonna go with round 2 TKO for Stosic. But the longer this fight goes, the better favor it goes for Dev Clark. I think that if he is able to get these takedowns, if he's able to win round 1 and get a takedown in round 2, I think that he will win this fight. All it takes is really 2 takedowns. I think Stosic will be gassed by round 3. He won't have anything left in the tank, and Clark could cruise to a decision. That's definitely a possible and actually a likely path to victory. I'd give that path around 40% to happen for Clark to grind out a decision. But the more likely outcome I gotta side with, and that is Stosic stuffing the takedowns and winning the fight with his striking. The next fight is in the women's featherweight division. We got Duda Santana taking on Bia Malecki. Santana is 3-0. Malecki is 1-0. The opening betting line for this one was Santana, the -165 favorite, to Bia Malecki at +125. We are now seeing the line flip to Malecki -125 to Santana at +105. So another line flip in this fight. A very interesting line move in this one. It is a close matchup. It's both of these women are pretty inexperienced. They have not fought in the UFC before. Malecki was on The Ultimate Fighter, but she lost to Leah Letson in that on that show and was obviously kicked off the show because that's how The Ultimate Fighter works. But Santana herself, not much experience. I think there's only one fight of Santana on the internet that I was able to find. She did look good in that fight. She looked like she had some powerful striking. A decent Muay Thai background. But her defense was definitely lacking in that one. She was throwing hard. Throwing with heavy punches, but she was not very technical. She was not very defensively sound. It looked like she had just nothing but offense on her mind. When she would hurt her opponent with a punch, she would just swing wild punches with long combinations. And she got rocked a couple times by her opponent. Her opponent's last name was, or her name was Anna Costa. So even though Santana was winning that fight all throughout the fight, Anna Costa was still able to rock her with a few punches. So the things that worry me about Santana are just her boxing defense. She has that tall woman's defense. She's not really moving her head too well, and she gets caught with a lot of punches. But she does have very aggressive striking, very wild, very powerful knees and punches. So she's not going to be an easy fight for Bia Malecki by any means. But Bia Malecki, I think, will be the more technical striker in this one. She's got that Muay Thai style similar to Santana, just a little more polished. She throws elbows. She actually cut Leah Letson open with a nasty elbow on Tough. But her footwork was not very good. She struggled circling around the cage. She struggled avoiding the takedown of Leah Letson, and eventually she lost that fight just due to getting stuck against the cage, getting taken down, and just not being able to get off her back. So she did get off her back once or twice, I think, in round 1, but in round 2, Leah Letson got her down and kept her down for about 3 minutes and won that fight. So this one I'm expecting to be an entirely contested on the feet. I have not seen any offensive grappling from either one of these women, but they also have not fought in a while. Malecki, I hope her name is Bia Malecki. I mean, I could be butchering this. Leah Letson fought on The Ultimate Fighter back in July of 2018. That was about 10 months ago. But Duda Santana has not fought for about 18 months, so a very long layoff for her. I'm expecting these ladies to come in here and throw down on the feet. It should be a very, exciting kickboxing match. Hey man, sometimes, we see these, lower level, less experienced women, and they come into the UFC and you have low expectations, but they throw the fuck down, man. We've seen that, a lot lately. The most particular one being Luina Carolina, and who was the opponent that she fought? Let me pull that shit up. Carolina and Cachoeira. That was a real fun fight. Those women were throwing the fuck down. And people weren't thinking too much of that fight before it. So I expect this one to be very entertaining. I think that, it could go either way, really. It's a really back and forth type of fight, a coin flip type of fight. I give the technical edge to Malecki. I think that, she obviously is the more technical striker. I think that will pay dividends the longer this fight goes. But, man, she's going to have trouble with Santana's pressure, with Santana's aggression. This fight is at 145. Malecki has fought most of her fights at 135, I believe. So I expect Santana to be the much bigger woman. She's going to be marching Malecki down. And, initially I sided with Malecki because of the technique edge. But I'm going to actually go with Santana in this one. I think her size and her aggression will be too much for Malecki, and Santana will win on the scorecards in this one. The next fight is in the lightweight division. We got Nick Hein, who is 14-4-1, taking on Frank Camacho, who is 21-7. The opening betting line for this one was Nick Hein, the favorite, at -180 to Frank Camacho, the +140 underdog. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we are seeing Nick Hein -105, Frank Camacho -115. So a lot more action coming in on Frank Camacho's way. This fight is almost at a pick'em in this one. So I agree with the line movement, but where it's at now, I honestly think that this fight is a pass in the money line aspect of things. Maybe Camacho by knockout would be a nice prop line to stab at, but I don't expect the odds to be too good on that one either. Yeah, +480. That's actually pretty good. That might be worth a play on that one. So things to note about this matchup: Camacho is dropping down from 170 back to 155. I say back to because he has fought at 155 before. His last fight at 155 was against Damian Brown. Very exciting, entertaining matchup, back and forth. Just great fight. But he missed weight for that fight by 5 pounds. So very worrisome that he is dropping back down in the weight. You gotta wonder what the fuck the motivation is to drop back down to 155. Obviously, he struggled at welterweight, suffering losses to Dober and to Neal. The Dober fight was very close, but the Neal fight, he was just absolutely outclassed in that fight. Bell-to-bell domination from Jeff Neal, and he eventually put Frank Camacho in a coffin with a picture-perfect left head kick. Nick Hein, the opponent in this matchup, has also, struggled a bit lately. I think he's coming off of 3 losses in a row. He was tapped out by Davi Ramos with the rear naked choke. He lost a split decision to Teymur Hadzovic as well. I don't know how that was split. I'm pretty sure Hadzovic won that fight pretty clearly. It was only 2 losses in a row, though. So, Nick Hein, he's people, you'll hear people talk about him like he's a grappler. You'll say he has a black belt in judo. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He's got a great ground game, but I really don't see him use that ground game too much. I've seen, obviously saw him, get tapped out by Davi Ramos. No shame in that loss because Ramos is a world-class black belt, but Hein, his ground game is made out to be his strong suit, but he really doesn't use it much. That judo black belt, it comes in handy from time to time in MMA, but it's not really something you can base your whole game around. So I don't really like what I've seen from Hein lately. He's got decent boxing, but he was outstruck by Teymur Hadzovic all fight, in my opinion. He actually was dropped by Teymur in the 3rd round of that fight with the right hand. So the chin of Hein is in question. I really just haven't seen him look very good at all lately in the cage. I think his last win was about 2 years ago. Let's see, who was it against? Tai Hyung Bang back in 2016. Yeah, so about 2.5 years since he's won a fight in the octagon. And you look at his last one, Tai Hyung Bang. I've heard of him, don't know much about him. Yutsuki Kaiua, don't know him. Lutsaka Suaki, don't know him. I don't even know how I missed all these fights. I didn't see any of these fights. They were all in the UFC. His last win, good win, is over Drew Dober back in 2014. So, not saying that, Frank Camacho has looked too great lately either, but man, I really have not seen much good out of Nick Hein lately. So this one comes down to how Camacho will look at 155 again. I think that the weight cut will be severe for Camacho. He's a big dude. He missed weight at 160 for his last lightweight fight, and I imagine that moving back down to 155 is going to take a lot out of Camacho. Camacho has a very good chin. Even though he was knocked out in his last fight, he ate a lot of punishment in that fight before he was eventually knocked out. And I don't think that he will be able to withstand those same type of shots at 155 that he was eating early on in that Jeff Neal fight. But luckily, Nick Hein is not really a power striker at all. And Camacho has got a really good ground game of his own right. That fight against Damian Brown, he showed a really nice takedown game, nice guard passing, good sub defense. He was in a deep rear naked choke in that fight, and he was able to escape. So, I'm going to just side with Frank Camacho in this one. I think that he's the better striker. I think that his defensive grappling will be good enough to fend off any attacks from Nick Hein, and I think that he will be the one who initiates the ground attacks in this one. I think that Camacho could end up in top position if it goes to the ground, but I expect Camacho to make this his type of fight, which is a brawl. Man, he's gonna try to make Hein uncomfortable. He's gonna try to touch that chin of Hein, and I think that he will do that. I think that we're gonna see a back and forth brawl for a round or two, and I think that eventually Camacho lands that knockout shot on Nick Hein, finishing him with TKO in the second round. The next fight takes place in the lightweight division. We have Stevie Ray, who is 22-8, taking on Leonardo Santos, who is 16-3-1. The opening betting line for this one was Leonardo Santos, the -195 favorite, to Stevie Ray at +155. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, we are seeing Santos -200 to Ray at +170. So, two-way action coming in on this fight. I'm honestly very surprised by the line in this fight. Leo Santos has not fought in almost 2.5 years. His last win was in October of 2016. Not his last win, his last fight, excuse me. So he's been extremely inactive. I don't know if it was USADA or it was injuries. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a combination of the two. But regardless, he's coming off that 2.5-year layoff, and he's a 2-1 favorite over a solid fighter like Stevie Ray, who has been active this entire time that Santos has been, on the sidelines. So getting down to the matchup in this one, Santos, initially was a jiu-jitsu guy. He's got a jiu-jitsu black belt, trains out of Nova União, or he at one point did. I don't know if he still does. But he seems to have, fallen in love with his kickboxing. He got that knockout of Kevin Lee I guess it was kind of long ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And, after that, he has just, tried to kickbox a lot more. His most recent fight against Adriano Martins, a fellow jiu-jitsu black belt, was contested pretty much entirely on the feet. I don't know if it was because he respected Martin's ground game and just wanted to keep this one standing, but and then even Santos's kickboxing, it's decent at best. It's not really anything too special. He doesn't really particularly do one thing really well on the feet. But, he did fight Tony Martin not too long ago at lightweight. He had a really nice outside trip takedown. He was able to pass Tony Martin's guard, get to mount, and get a rear naked choke in that fight. And that's a really high-level grappler in Anthony Rocco Martin. But that fight was 4 years ago, so who the hell knows or maybe even longer than that. I think it was 5 years ago, actually. So who knows what that even means anymore? Who knows what Santos's athletic ability is like, what his motivations are for this fight. So getting over his opponent, Stevie Ray, in this one. Stevie Ray is, a very active guy. He's, a southpaw. He's got a nice left hand. Throws some nice kicks. He also has, a pretty solid defensive grappling game. He was able to reverse some takedowns on Alan Patrick when they fought. He ended up in mount. He was attacking an armbar versus Alan Patrick. He, that was a pretty deep armbar that he was attempting on Patrick, but unfortunately, Patrick escaped it and ended up on top, and he was able to stay there for a while. But Ray was defending well. He was active. He was trying to get back on his feet, but he, eventually was just lost that fight by, being taken down, not being able to get off his back. He was defending well. Like I said, he wasn't, in risk of any submissions, but Alan Patrick was just stalling. He was just, laying on praying in that fight, just trying to win a decision on the cards, and, he ended up doing that. But one thing that worries me about Ray in that fight is that Patrick was setting up his takedowns with some big loopy punches that really didn't have much technique behind them. And those punches were tagging Ray. So, even in Stevie Ray's most recent fight with Justin Ayari, he looked decent at best in that fight. Ayari gave him a tough fight, and Ayari is again, a pretty lower level opponent who was coming off of a long layoff himself. So, Ray is no world beater by any means, but he's definitely a very solid, well-rounded martial artist. So, coming down to how this matchup plays out, I expect it to be really close. And honestly, I think that the value in the betting realm is on Stevie Ray in this one as that plus 170 underdog. I think that his defensive grappling is good enough to avoid any submissions from Santos in this one, and I think that this one will be contested mostly on the feet, and I think that Stevie Ray is actually the more technical and more experienced guy on the feet. I think that Ray's activity is going to pay him dividends. I think Santos will be feeling that ring rust from 2.5 years out of the cage, and I expect Ray to win a decision 29-28 in this one. The next fight is taking place in the women's bantamweight division. We have Tanya Evinger, who is 19-8, taking on Lena Lansberg, who is 8-4. The opening betting line for this one was Tanya Evinger, the favorite, at minus 175 to Lena Lansberg, the underdog, at plus 135. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, we are seeing Evinger minus 275 to Lansberg plus 235. So a lot of movement coming in on Tanya Evinger in this one. And I'm not going to say rightfully so, because I think it's a little too steep where it sits right now, but I do agree with Evinger being the favorite in this one. Evinger is, a veteran of the fight game. She's, had a very patented style for a long time. She's looking to come out here, be aggressive, close the distance, get in that clinch, get the takedown, and then, either get a submission or, get a TKO finish on the ground. But, her last fight against Aspen Ladd, it looked very worrisome. She came out real aggressive in the striking of that one. She was trying to hit Ladd with as many punches as she can. And, she did land a few strikes in that one. But eventually, Ladd clinched her up. And Evinger was looking, a little uncomfortable in the clinch. She didn't look like she knew what she was doing too much. Evinger went for a weak and a desperate and totally terrible takedown that Ladd easily reversed, and then Ladd just got top position and smashed her with ground and pound for the finish in that one. But Evinger before that was coming off of a win off of Yana Kunitskaya. She was able to submit Yana Kunitskaya in that one after their controversial no decision, where actually Evinger was submitted in that one. But she also got knocked out by Cyborg, too. That was, a brutal beatdown. Lena Lansberg also fought Cyborg. And again, brutal beatdown in that one. But Lansberg, she's a Muay Thai fighter. She's got some decent kicks. She's, pretty solid in the clinch. She actually, both these women have fought Aspen Ladd as well, and Lansberg looked much better against Ladd. She actually, I believe, won round 1 against Ladd in the clinch. She was, hitting her with some good knees in the clinch, but eventually, Ladd got the takedown, the double leg in round 2, and Ladd did the same thing to Lansberg as she did with Evinger. Got her back taken and smashed her with some ground and pound. But another common opponent amongst these two, they have a lot of common opponent, was Yana Kunitskaya. And Yana Kunitskaya dominated Lena Lansberg, took her down, outstruck her, outclinched her, everything, while Evinger was able to tap out Yana Kunitskaya in that one. So, very close matchup in this one. Honestly, I just think that you can't be confident in either woman. I think that Evinger will eventually get the takedown. When it's on the feet, though, I expect it to be close. I expect Lansberg to win the clinching in this one. I don't expect it there to be too much striking on the feet. In range, I think that this one will be contested mostly on the ground and in the clinch. Against the cage, a lot of stalling, expecting a really boring fight in this one. But I think at some point Evinger will get the takedown. I think that she will get the top position, and I think that she will win the rounds that way. And I'm predicting, I think that Lansberg might steal around, maybe rounds 1 or 2. She might land the cleaner, harder strikes and win it on the scorecards. But I expect Evinger to eventually win a decision 29-28. The next fight in the welterweight division, we got Sergey Khandozhko, who is 26-5-1, taking on Rostam Akman, who is 6-0. The opening betting line for this one was Sergey, the -175 favorite, to Akman at +135. Right now, over on 5 Dimes, we are seeing Sergey -165 to Akman +145. So two-way action coming in on this fight. Both of these gentlemen are making their UFC debuts in this one. So it should be a good fight. Both of these gentlemen look UFC ready. Maybe not so much Akman because there's not very much footage of him on the internet. I have not seen one of his full pro MMA fights. That's how hard it is to find footage on this guy. There's clips, there's highlight reels, there's a lot of footage of him through the amateurs, but in the pro fights, there's no footage online of this dude. So that leads me to believe that the UFC was looking for some Swedish guys, to fill up the card with, and someone referred Akman for this matchup, and the UFC brought him in here. So, but I've been impressed with the dude's skills. He has a very diverse amateur background. He fought in the International MMA Federation tournament or some shit. This dude fought 4 times in 4 days. 3 times in 1 year. I'll say that again. He fought 4 MMA fights in 4 days. So 1 fight every single day for 4 days straight, and he did that 3 times in 1 calendar year. So that was in 2015 and 2016. So the will and the toughness and the everything that it takes to do that is just very impressive on its own right. He looks like he likes to box primarily. He looks like he throws a lot of wild strikes in the feed. He does not have very good defense. He's actually kept his hands very low and been caught and knocked out with punches before. I saw that on the amateurs. But he also can hit his own offensive takedowns. He likes rocking you with punches and then hitting you with a takedown. But the takedowns aren't very technical. It looks like he was just muscling lower level opponents down to the floor. But they were effective in the amateur and the lower level pro scene. But I don't expect that same type of game to work here against Sergey Khandozhko. So Khandozhko is a much more experienced fighter. He's got 32 pro MMA fights to Akman's 6. So over 5 times the experience for Khandozhko in this one. That's going to be a big factor for him. Khandozhko, his takedown defense looked very good. He countered a takedown attempt with a really nice judo throw, and he went right to the mount in that one. That was in, I think, his most recent fight against Adriano Rodriguez. Yeah, he ended up winning that fight via a beautiful spinning back kick to the liver. Walk-off spinning back kick. Khandozhkov's striking looks very crisp. His offensive striking looks really good. But, in terms of defense, it's a bit of a liability. He was dropped with a jab versus Benny Alloway in his fight a few years ago. He has been, tapped out a few times, by Alloway eventually, by Vlasenko back in 2017. So, he's definitely lost before. He's not an indestructible, Russian prospect that's coming in here like we've seen lately. But he's a very solid competitor. He's definitely very well-rounded. But in terms of defensive grappling, I don't think that Khandozhko is very good. He relies on stalling and holding. If he gets taken down, he will, just hold on to you and, just pray for a stand-up. And in Russia, they are much more liberal with the stand-ups. Anytime there is nothing happening for 10 seconds on the ground in Russia, they'll stand you up. While in America, while the rest of the world, it's usually like 30, 45, even 60 seconds of doing absolutely nothing before the ref will eventually stand you up. So, it's an interesting matchup because on the feet, Sergey should be the much more technical and experienced guy. But, Akman is very aggressive. He's powerful. He throws heavy punches. And, Akman, if he looks for the takedown in this one, I think that would be a very good game plan because Sergey has not shown defensive grappling. He, has shown decent takedown defense, but once he gets on the ground, his get-ups are not very good. He does not look very, he doesn't look like he wants to get back to his feet very quickly. Like I said, he just wants to hold on to his opponent and hopefully the referee stands him up. So I don't think that's going to happen in this fight. I don't think he can rely on this one to be saved by the Russian referees. So if Akman wants to go for the takedown and try to win out rounds with the top control, I think he could do so. But I slightly sign with Sergey Khandozhko in this one. I think that Akman is just a little too raw and inexperienced for Sergey at this point in his career. I think Sergey will outstrike him on the feet. I think that he will avoid the takedowns of Akman. And I'm going to side with Sergey to get... I'll go with the decision in this one. I don't think that Akman will get knocked out. But it also wouldn't totally surprise me if Khandozhko did get the knockout in this one. But I'm going to side with Sergey in this one. And we're going to move on to the next fight. It's officially the main card. Who knows what they're going to do with the main card now that the one fight has been canceled. But this fight's officially the main card. We got Daniel Teymur, who is 6-3, taking on Sung Bin Jo, who is 9-0. The opening betting line for this one was Sung Bin Jo, the minus 195 favorite, to Teymur plus 155. Right now we are seeing Sung Bin Jo minus 135 to Daniel Teymur at plus 115. So Daniel Teymur getting another shot on the UFC after 3 losses in a row. Surprising to say the least. Teymur has got good striking for one round. He had a good start against Danny Henry where he was rocking him with some punches bad, but eventually gassed out and lost the second half of that fight. Teymur's got bad sub defense, bad cardio, bad takedown defense. Just not much that what guy does well. He comes from a Muay Thai background and just really has not adapted his game for MMA well at all. He has no ability to wrestle. He can't stuff a takedown for his life. But even with that, he was able to get top position on Chris Fishgold a few times. He just took advantage of some sloppy takedown attempts from Fishgold, and he ended up on top and landed some ground and pound. But, the IQ of Teymur is just garbage, man. He was grabbing the cage and getting points taken. He went for a leg lock versus Fishgold and, lost the position. He's just, he got taken down and he got mounted. And after 1 second of mount, not even any ground and pound, he was giving up his back and he tapped to the rear naked choke right away. He wilted in that fight pretty badly. But his opponent, Sung Bin Jo, not really too much of a grappler, primarily a striker in this one, so it's actually a matchup that Teymur can win. And Sung Bin Jo has one huge glaring weakness, and that's checking leg kicks. In his past 2 or 3 fights, he's been hit with some heavy leg kicks. His most recent fight, he was hurt to the legs bad. He was limping, and his legs looked like he didn't have, anything under him. He has no ability to check leg kicks. So And he also was getting hit with some punches too. He did not look too solid defensively. He was willing to trade in the pocket, tuck his chin, and just throw bombs. But then he eventually dropped his opponent in the fourth round of that fight and swarmed him with some knees and punches for the finish. And Seung-Bin Jo's takedown defenses also looked pretty good. He fought an opponent named Nakamura, where he was able to defend a couple single legs in that fight and eventually TKO Nakamura as well in that fight. So Seung-Bin Jo's looked good. He's looked pretty technical on the feet. This is just a really hard fight to predict. Joe has never fought in the UFC. Teymur has never won a fight in the UFC. But I expect if Teymur had a little bit of sense in him, he would watch the tape on Joe, realize that he can't check leg kicks, and implement a leg kick game plan. And, coming from a Muay Thai background, I'm actually going to side with Teymur to execute that game plan. I just think that Joe's weakness of the leg kicks and his boxing defense is just a little too much of a glaring hole, and I think that Teymur will take advantage of that. I think Teymur throws pretty hard for that round one, and he has a good chance at touching the chin of Seung-Bin Jo. But if this goes past round one, honestly, I favor Joe's cardio to kick in. He should start outstriking Teymur in rounds 2 and 3. But I think that Teymur will start fast. He will have some early success, and he will win this fight. I'm going to go with knockout in the first round. But would not surprise me for Seung-Bin Jo to take over in the latter rounds and outstrike Teymur. Maybe even Seung-Bin Jo will implement his first offensive wrestling game plan for this one, because Teymur's ground game is just such a glaring weakness as well. So both of these guys have a lot of weaknesses. Neither of them are very good. It's a tough fight to bet on. I definitely would be dog or pass, and I'm going to side with Teymur. Next fight is in the lightweight division. We got Christos Giagos, who is 16-7, taking on Damir Hadzovic, who is 13-4. The opening betting line for this one was Hadzovic, the minus 275 favorite to Christos Giagos at plus 195. Right now we are seeing Hadzovic minus 175 to Giagos plus 155. So, interesting line movement in this one. I agree with it. I think that where the line was set was a little bit too high for Hadzovic. So I actually think that there's a good bit of value on Giagos at plus 155. Both of these guys are making big improvements. I think both of their boxing and their stand-up has looked much improved. And I think that both of their ground games have improved as well. Giagos came back to the UFC and was tapped out in his first fight by Oliveira. And then he went out in the next fight versus Hirota, and he won that fight pretty convincingly. He showed better boxing in that fight. He was hitting Hirota with some good punches, and he was able to hit a few takedowns, get some top position, and win rounds with top position versus Hirota. So, Giagos has a vast array of takedowns, and he's got very solid top control. Damir Hadzovic has got, very nice boxing. He's got a good jab. He also has, good knees. He uses the knees to counter the pressure like he did with Marcin Held. Not too long ago, knocked Marcin Held out with a knee. But what happened in the beginning of that fight is interesting. Marcin Held won the first 2 rounds of that fight with his takedowns and with his top control. Now, Giagos is nothing in the same, realm as Marcin Held's top control. Held's a world-class grappler, while Giagos is just, a good MMA fighter. So I'm not completely relying on Giagos to take Hadzovic down and keep him down, because Hadzovic has made big improvements in his ground game since losing those fights to Alan Patrick and to... I guess he didn't even lose to Marcin Held because he knocked him out in round 3. But, Hadzovic, his boxing looks sharp versus Marco Polo Reyes in his last fight, and he actually was able to realize that Polo Reyes' ground game is actually pretty bad. He hit his own offensive takedowns and got mounted and smashed Polo Reyes with some ground and pound for the TKO finish in round 2 of that fight. So, very impressive performance in the last fight from Hadzovic. So both of these guys are making big improvements fight to fight. I think it's going to be close on the feet. I think that Hadzovic should have the slight edge in in the feet. I think it'll be close on the ground, but Giagos will have the slight edge on the ground. So where the odds are at now, I think it's dog or pass, because I just could not trust Hadzovic to stay off his back and win this fight, on the scorecards. I do see this one going to the cards, and I just see Giagos edging it out 29-28. I think that, in terms of weaknesses, I think Hadzovic has just shown more weaknesses, and, the takedown defense at times, his ability to get off his back. And I think that Giagos will be relentless with the takedown. I think that he will get top position, and I think he will win 2 of 3 rounds to get the decision in this one. But it's a really close fight. I'm really looking forward to this one. I would not be surprised if Hadzovic, keeps making improvements with his ground game, is able to stuff the takedowns, is able to get off his back, and he's able to outstrike Giagos to a decision. It's likely either way. Honestly, I think, a safe bet might be fight goes the distance, but I honestly expect that the odds to be pretty wide on that one. Let's see if we can find it here. Fight goes minus 150. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. So, that could be the play for this one. Next fight is in the featherweight division. We got Makwan Amirikhani, who is 14-3, taking on Chris Fishgold, who is 18-2-1. The opening betting line for this one was Fishgold, the minus 145 favorite, to Amirikhani at plus 105. Right now we are seeing Fishgold minus 115 to Amirikhani at minus 105. So initially, Amirikhani actually shot up to, I think, around plus 155. Let's check best fight odds. Yeah, he was hovering plus 125, plus 120 a few weeks ago, and he has since been, bet down a lot. And I think that that's the right move in this one. I am picking Amirikhani to win this one. I actually think I got in on him at the plus money. But it's not a super confident pick. I think that both of these guys, have weaknesses. I'd say Fishgold has the more glaring weaknesses. So starting things off with Fishgold, he is, an English wrestler. He's got good offensive wrestling, but his defensive wrestling is, relatively unknown. I think he's kind of desperate with the takedowns. I think he makes a lot of mistakes on the ground. He went for a terrible guillotine attempt versus Daniel Teymur, and he got put off his back, or he got put on his back after that bad guillotine attempt. Usually his first couple takedown attempts are good. He usually will get his opponent down once or twice early in the fight, but after that, his takedowns get desperate. They get telegraphed. He has terrible energy management. He usually gasses out in fights. Whenever he hits you with a punch that hurts you, he usually just swarms you with crazy combinations and, loses his composure completely. And it also seems like he throws about 100% in every single one of his punches. That's why he gassed out so much, or that's why he gasses out in most of his fights, because he just starts fast. And if he doesn't get that early finish, he usually gasses out in rounds 2 and 3. So Fishgold, I expect him to come out here trying to get the takedown right away, like he always does. But I don't think that would be a good move. I think that Fishgold actually has an edge on the feet in this one. I think that Fishgold throws with a lot more power. I just think that Amirikhani's chin is a little suspect as well, with being dropped 2 times versus Jason Knight in his last fight. And Amirikhani is a little too cocky at times too. He can keep his hands low, he can get complacent, and he can get caught with punches, which is what happened versus Jason Knight. So I think that if Fishgold were to keep this fight on the feet, it would be the better game plan for him. But I don't think Fishgold will do that. I think that the wrestling is kind of, his bread and butter, or at least he thinks it is. And I think that he will chase the takedown in this one. But that's where Amirikhani will take over, honestly. I think that Amirikhani is the better grappler out of the two. I think that Makwan has a good chance at reversing position, stuffing takedowns, attempting submission attempts on Fishgold. And I think that eventually the grappling pace that Makwan is able to put on his opponents, he's had long grappling fights with Arnold Allen, with Jason Knight. I think that Makwan's cardio and his grappling will take over, and I think the Fishgold will gas out like usual, and I think that Makwan will actually get a finish in round 3. So my pick is going to be Makwan to get the submission in round 3 of this fight. I also could see, Fishgold touching the chin of Amirikhani to get the knockout early in maybe rounds 1 or round 2. So it's it's a toss up in this one. That's why you see the odds so close right now at a near pick'em. Makwan at plus money was a good bet, but where it's at now, I think that it's probably a pass. Maybe even a good play on this one would be fight doesn't go the distance, which is minus 120, pretty good odds, so it's possible. And those are oh man, Fishgold by TKO plus 835. That's a bet for sure, I mean, Fishgold throws hard punches, and if Jason Knight's, weak punches were able to drop Amirikhani, then I have no doubt that if Fishgold connects hard on the chin, then he will put Amirikhani down. So, close fight. I'm going to slightly lean Makwan, but there's some odds on, there's some value on the prop odds, so check them out. Next fight, I assume this fight will be the co-main event now. We got Jimmy Manuwa, who is 17-5, taking on Alexander Rakic, who is 11-1. This fight is taking place in the light heavyweight division, and the opening betting line for this one was Rakic minus 285 to Jimmy Manuwa plus 205. Right now we are seeing Rakic minus 190 to Manuwa plus 165, so more action coming in Manuwa's way. I do agree with it. I think that where the initial line was set was a bit too steep, but ultimately, I do see Rakic winning this fight. I've been much more impressed with Rakic lately than Manuwa. Manuwa's coming off of 3 losses in a row, including the 2 of those being knockouts. Pretty bad knockouts as well. He got knocked out bad versus he got rocked behind the ear with a shot versus Ozdemir, then eventually dropped with another punch, and he was in that war with Thiago Santos where he was knocked out with that uppercut versus Maheta. So even the fight in between those two versus Jan Blachowicz, he was a step behind that entire fight. He was outstruck on the feet. He struggled with the jab of Blachowicz. He struggled with the takedowns of Blachowicz as well. So, Manuwa's, a tricky guy. He has, 2 speeds, and it seems to be, balls to the wall or, coasting to a decision. And, most of these days it seems like he's going balls to the wall. So I expect him to come out here and, try to throw down right away. And, I think Rakic will be willing to do that as well. I think Rakic has really nice boxing. I've been impressed with him. He throws with real power. He's got power in his hands. I think that, Manuwa's chin has definitely taken a lot of damage over the years too. So I like Rakic's chances at rocking Manuwa with a punch. Rakic was quickly, hurt versus Dev Clark with some elbows to the back of the ear while he was going for a takedown, but he eventually recovered and finished Dev Clark in that fight. He also showed some very good inside leg kicks in the inside and outside leg kicks versus Justin Ledette in their fight. I expect them to come into play here. I expect Rakic to be kicking the legs of Manuwa. Rakic also has the ability to hit offensive takedowns, to keep top control, to ground and pound his opponents. He really mixed up the striking and the takedowns versus Ledette well. He was able to knock Ledette down with leg kicks. He was able to drop Ledette with punches. He was able to take him down, pound him with ground and pound. He dominated that fight. So on the feet, I expect this one to be a firefight, man. I expect both of these guys to be trading in the pocket. And, Manuwa has, much more experience in brawls. He's been in brawls throughout all of his career, and he's come out on top of a lot of them. So, I expect Rakic to quickly change levels, though, if it does get to that. I think Rakic will want to, jab and leg kick and stay at range. But if Manuwa starts blitzing him and trying to close that range, I expect Rakic to level change. And, I expect Rakic to keep Manuwa on his back. And, Manuwa's struggled with the takedowns of Blachowicz with a lot of guys throughout his career. So I think Rakic will, mix up the takedowns, mix up the boxing very well in this fight. And I actually lean Rakic to get a finish in this one. I either see him, winning a dominant 30-27 decision or possibly getting a TKO with some ground and pound in rounds 2 and 3. I just think the top pressure and the ground and pound will be too much for Jimmy Manuwa in this one, and I think that Rakic will get the TKO later in this fight. So, as we mentioned before, Volkan Ozdemir versus Ilir Latifi has been canceled. That was, very unfortunate. It should have been a great fight. Got some good odds on Ilir Latifi early in this one, but the bets will be voided, of course. And, we're missing out on a good fight, but it's a shame. We still got ourselves one more fight in the light heavyweight division. The main event of the evening, we got Alexander Gustafsson, who is 18-5, taking on Anthony Smith, who is 31-14. The opening betting line for this one was Alex Gustafsson at minus 245 to Anthony Smith plus 175. Right now, we are seeing Gustafsson minus 335 to Smith at plus 275. So, even more action coming in on the favorite in this one, Alex Gustafsson. I think that Gustafsson should be the favorite in this one. I think he will win this fight, but where the odds are at right now, I think it's way too steep in the favor of Gustafsson. I think that there's some pretty good value on Anthony Smith. Not saying I'm betting on him, not saying I'm taking the value bet. I'm just saying that it's dog or pass where it's at right now. So both of these guys fought John Jones last. Both of them were dominated. Both of them looked tentative. They looked very unaggressive. Gustafsson, was I think the more shocking performance. Smith came in as the 5-1 underdog. Man, I just stuttered hard there. Came in as that 5-1 underdog. And he looked like it, he looked scared. He looked like the moment was getting to him. He showed no aggression. He got dominated bell to bell. But Gustafsson, they had that competitive fight the first time. It was a rematch. Gustafsson was only like 2.5-1 underdog, and Gustafsson just, never really pulled the trigger. He didn't look the same as he did in his other fights. He struggled to find the range. He was getting kicked a lot by Jones, getting teeped in the gut and in the legs. He defended some takedowns early in rounds 2 of the fight, but eventually John Jones just blasted a double leg in round 3 and, smashed Gustafsson with ground and pound from his guard, passed him, mounted him, and then finished him with some more ground and pound. Smith at least lasted to a decision with John Jones, but, he still, he looked, terrible in that fight as well. So, Gustafsson, his last win was back in May of 2017 versus Glover Teixeira. So, 2 years since Gustafsson has picked up a win in the octagon. He did look very good in that fight. His boxing looked great versus Teixeira. He was able to avoid any, takedown attempts of Teixeira, keep it on the feet, and just completely outclassed Teixeira on the feet, eventually getting that knockout in the 5th round, excuse me. Smith also, had a good run, last year. He knocked out Rashad, he knocked out Shogun, and then he eventually tapped out Volkan Ozdemir in the 3rd round of their fight. He actually, showed, the ability to game plan well in that Volkan fight. He knew Volkan was a fast starter. He knew Volkan, big heavy hitter in round 1, but he tends to gas out pretty quick, and he withstood the early storm in round 1. He lost round 1 in the striking. Volkan actually got a takedown in round 2, and Anthony Smith just stalled out on there. He held Volkan Ozdemir's hands and literally just waiting until the round was over. Survived round 2, and then round 3 he had his own takedown. Ozdemir got right up to his back and gave up his back, and Anthony Smith took the back and got the rear naked choke. So it was an impressive performance, honestly. It wasn't pretty, he didn't look like a world beater. He didn't dominate it by any means, but he fought smart. He knew what was coming from Volkan. He just took the passive least resistance, and that was to stay defensive, lose the fight early, and then right when Volkan gassed out, take advantage and get the choke. So, who has looked better lately? It's been Smith, no doubt. Smith has been so much more active. And let me compare these two guys of how much they fought lately. Because, Smith has been fighting, I think, 3 times a year or something like that. While, Gustafsson, like I said, has had one fight since May of 2017. So, since that win versus Glover Teixeira, Anthony Smith has gone 4-2, beating Hector Lombard, Rashad Evans, Shogun and Ozdemir. So the only losses coming to Thiago Santos at middleweight and to that decision to John Jones. So, the guy with the more momentum, the guy who I think is the better athlete, who's going to be, stronger, quicker, better cardio, that's going to be Anthony Smith, honestly. But, I can't go out there and confidently say that I think Anthony Smith's going to get his hand raised. I think that Smith's takedown defense is not very good. And, when I think about how this fight is going to go, I think of Alexander Gustafsson's fight against Jan Blachowicz. And that fight, Blachowicz was actually landing some solid punches on the feet versus Gustafsson. It was a very competitive fight on the feet. And I think Gustafsson was like, yeah, fuck this. I'm not going to, have a competitive fight on the feet. I'm going to, just take this guy down. So Gustafsson mixed up the level changes very well in that fight. He was able to keep top position. He was able to avoid any submission attempts from Blachowicz. And he was able to win the fight with his takedowns, and that was a 3-round fight. It was a few years ago. It was before Blachowicz really developed his ground game. And we haven't seen Gustafsson, offensively wrestle well since. But, it's definitely a path to victory for Gustafsson. Whenever Smith starts swinging big loopy punches, you just level change and keep him on his back, and I think that will be a good game plan for Alexander Gustafsson. I honestly think that Gustafsson should be the better boxer at this point in his career. Still, he should be, but he just hasn't shown it. He hasn't given me any evidence to lead to believe that his boxing is still crisp, that he will outstrike Anthony Smith in this matchup. So, I got a weird feeling that Anthony Smith will win this one. I'm not gonna pick him. I'm gonna pick Gustafsson to win a decision in this one. But, it's where the odds are at now. It's definitely dog or pass. Honestly, my plus 275 actually might be worth a value bet. I know I did say a few minutes ago that I have not locked in a value bet at that plus 275 odds for Smith, but I do think that the odds are wide in this one. Anthony Smith being a 275 underdog, that's just a little too high for me. So I'm going to pick Gustafsson and get it done by decision, but I think it'll be a close competitive fight. And that's going to be all for the UFC on ESPN Plus 11 card going down this Saturday in Stockholm, Sweden, starting at 10 a.m. So with that being said, we're just going to quickly recap the UFC Rochester card that went down this past weekend. So starting things off on the prelims, we had Julio Arce knock out Julian Erosa with a nice head kick in round 3. Zach Cummings with a come from behind submission in round 3 as well. I believe he was losing that fight, maybe 2-0, honestly, and he ended up dropping Trevin Giles and getting that submission. Ed Herman knocked out Patrick Cummins with a knee in round 1 of their fight. Very impressive performance from Herman. Grant Dawson got the choke against Mike Trizano. Huge letdown from Mike Trizano in that fight. He was looking good. He started to stuff the takedowns. He was outstriking Dawson on the feet, but then he eventually let Dawson get that body lock, let him get the takedown. Was not nearly aggressive enough trying to get back to his feet. Was just kind of content to play defense, and eventually paid the ultimate price, getting tapped out with a rear naked choke. Michel Pereira knocking out Danny Roberts without flying knee, just like I said he would. Just like he was a crazy madman, Danny Roberts is the dumbest fighter on the roster, and he was, striking with Pereira, and he paid the price, again, knocked out. Desmond Green, outclassed Charles Jourdain to a decision. Aspen Ladd defeated Sijara Eubanks to a decision. Now, let me talk about this fight for a second. This is the only fight I really fucking care about on the card, and I was so pissed off when this decision came through. This fight was a draw. It was a 28-28 draw. Round 1, close round. Last 15 seconds of the fight, Sijara lights up Aspen Ladd with a combination of punches, drops Aspen Ladd, and then was following up with ground and pound on the ground. Okay? Clear 10-9 round for Sijara Eubanks. It was close. It wasn't dominant. There was not a lot of sustained damage from Sijara throughout the round, but the flurry at the end, the dropping with the punches, the ground and pound, clearly enough to win the round 10-8 in my mind. And according to the judging criteria, the official judging criteria. Round 2, Aspen Ladd gets the takedown. She keeps her down the whole round. She takes her back. She's hitting her with ground and pound. She almost gets the rear naked choke, but Sijara Eubanks survive. But it was, 4.5 minutes of top pressure, of ground and pound, of submission attempts. That is 10-8. That is a sustained dominant round. It doesn't have to be close to finishing. It just has to be dominant. And if one person is in mount or is in getting back takes or is in top position the entire round, that's a clearly dominant round. 10-8 round for Aspen Ladd. Now, round 3, again, back and forth type of fight, back and forth type of round, just like round 1 was. But I gave the edge to Sijara Eubanks. I thought she was landing the cleaner punches throughout the entire round. She was, she still had defense, while Aspen Ladd was just kind of coming forward and throwing. Sijara, I think, was landing the better shots, and she was deflecting better shots too. So that was a 10-9 round for Sijara Eubanks for me. 10 plus 10 plus 8, 28. 9 plus 10 plus 9, 28. 28 draw for this fight. And these fucking judges robbed Sijara Eubanks of her draw. She fought hard, man. She was in a bad position in that mount. She, fought out of the chokes, fought out of every attack that Aspen Ladd threw at her. She came back in round 3. She won round 3, and, she deserved that draw. And the judges stole that from her. Some of these judges gave it 30-26. Some of them gave Aspen Ladd the round where she got dropped in. Some of them gave Aspen Ladd a 10-9 round 2, even though it was clearly a dominant 10-8 round. The judges who were at that scoring that fight did not know the scoring criteria, and it's worrisome because one of those judges was Derek Cleary. Derek Cleary is a guy who refs fights all over the world, all over the world. Brian Miner, he gave Aspen Ladd round 1, the round where she was dropped in. She was dropped and rocked with punches, and they gave her that round. Don't know how. He correctly scored the fight otherwise than that. He gave Eubanks round 3. He gave Ladd 10-8 round 2. Eric Collion, he gave all 3 rounds to Aspen Ladd, including the rounds 1 and 3, which she lost. That guy should never judge again. So, and even the media, you look at the fans who scored this fight. Barely any of them scored it correctly. 4 of the 18 media members scored this fight correctly. 18.9% of fans scored the fight correctly. So it just goes to show how poorly the state of judging is in our sport. No particular one person's fault. It's the scoring criteria. But moving on, Davi Ramos, defeated Austin Hubbard, dominant victory. Charles Oliveira knocked out Nick Lentz with some punches and a very nice performance from him. Vicente Luque knocked out Derek Krantz in round 1. Felicia Spencer tapped out Megan Anderson in round 1. Very terrible performance from Megan Anderson in that one. Ian Heinisch dug deep. The motherfucking junkyard dog Ian Heinisch got the decision victory. You go back and listen last week. I said Antonio Carlos Jr. will win round 1. He will take him down in round 1. But in round 2, Heinisch will start defending the shots. Heinisch's cardio is going to kick in. He's going to start outstriking Carlos Jr. He might even end up in top position. That's exactly what happened in round 2. And in round 3, it came down to who has the better cardio. And that was Ian Heinisch. He won round 3. He dug motherfucking deep after losing round 1, and he won the decision against another black belt high-level opponent like Antonio Carlos Jr. Ian Heinisch is one of my favorite fighters on the roster right now. This dude just fights so hard every single fight. Just gotta love that guy. And in the main event, Rafael dos Anjos getting the submission via arm triangle choke. I believe it was arm triangle, versus Kevin Lee in round 4. Dos Anjos, just fought so well. He was defending Kevin Lee's takedowns. He was, his takedown defense looked good. He was getting back to his feet. His striking looked on point. And eventually, Rafael dos Anjos took Kevin Lee down and got the submission in that one. Rough performance from Kevin Lee at his welterweight debut. I honestly think that 155 is the place for Kevin Lee to fight. Don't think he has much of a home at welterweight, but nevertheless, very great performance from Rafael dos Anjos in that one. So that is going to do it for episode 62 of the Martian MMA podcast. We analyzed and predicted all 12 fights from the Stockholm card going down this weekend and recapped the UFC Rochester card from last week. So With that being said, that's going to do it for the podcast this week. I will catch you all next week before UFC 238. Peace.